82 on employment and unemployment, and I'm now going to do exactly the same thing that I did in lesson 81, which is go through a complete topic covering all the different concepts. Right, the first thing about this is the fact that we have real wage unemployment on here, and this is real wages and this is employment. And trade unions may push up wages because they want to look after their workers, and so what happens is by pushing up wages, they actually create more unemployment because employers will employ fewer people at that particular wage. Exactly the same argument with the national minimum wage on here as well. So we call that real wage unemployment. At the same time, people may not be willing to work at wage rates at this level because their unemployment benefits may be more than their wages, so therefore they will withdraw themselves from the labour market. So we call this voluntary unemployment. The same way that real wage unemployment is voluntary unemployment, people decide not to work, one, because they're not being paid enough, or secondly because the unemployment benefits are too much. So if you have a replacement ratio of 1, what that means is that you receive as much money for being unemployed as you would do in work. If the replacement ratio is 2, you receive twice as much being unemployed as you would do in work. So obviously you want to try and reduce the number to 0.5, whereby if you're out of work you only receive half as much as you would do in work. Consequences of unemployment. There are consequences for the individual and also for the economy. Examiners are sort of quite keen on this idea about how it affects the individual, and it's pretty obvious really. If you're unemployed, you're more likely to suffer from depression, mental health issues. There's going to be a lack of income, so that creates problems. Obviously, there's a lack of social cohesion in society. If there's a lot of people who are unemployed, one of the big concerns right now in Spain, for example, is there is 60% youth unemployment in Spain. Now, what's the long-term effect upon the economy? Because the longer you're out of work, you don't get used to being in work. It's depressing being out of work, but you also don't develop your skills. Another one, individuals may take to crime and everything else. So there's a big consequences of unemployment for individuals, but also for the economy at large. The more people you have unemployed, like say in Spain, that's going to decrease aggregate demand. The budget deficit is going to get worse and worse because the government's going to have to spend more on unemployment revenue. At the same time, we're getting less taxation revenue back in. There's this concept called hysteresis. Hysteresis is when people have been out of work for a long period of time, so therefore lack the skills to get back into work. So therefore this will shift the AS curve inwards. So there are consequences of unemployment both for individuals and also the economy. The last thing is, on this one, we measure unemployment in 2 ways, through the claimant count and through the labour force survey. In fact, what we use now is a labour force survey, simply because that's the measure that they use in the rest of Europe. Now basically in this one, if you're looking for work, if you're out of work, you're looking for work and you're prepared to start work, then you will be classified as being unemployed. However, under the claimant count, you could only be unemployed if you were also receiving benefits. So therefore the claimant count was much lower than the labour force survey, which is why previous governments enjoyed using the claimant count rather than the labour force survey. And whilst when they did have the claimant count, they also kept manipulating the figures or the definition of it, so therefore that would bring unemployment down. But that's governments for you. So just a little session on this one really. Real wage unemployment, consequences of unemployment for the individual and also for the economy, and then I'm going to bring the whole of unemployment together in the next session, which is also part of Okay, so we're still on lesson 82, and this is still about employment and unemployment. The first thing about this one is we have involuntary unemployment, and involuntary unemployment is cyclical unemployment, which is a lack of demand in the whole economy. And if there is a lack of demand, then you're going to lose your job. However, there is also voluntary unemployment, which is supposedly when people can't can't find jobs because they're not willing to accept any old job that comes along. Personally, I'm not that happy about this definition, but you've got to learn it for your A2 economics. So if you are structurally unemployed, they can say that you are voluntarily unemployed because you could find a job elsewhere. So if you lose your job in the shipbuilding industry, then you could find a job taking donkeys along the beach or something like that. Okay, or you could go and sell ice creams, or you could go and work in a bank, or you could work as a bouncer or whatever. Frictional unemployment, the time it takes you from job to job to job, but you could accept any job that comes along, so therefore you are voluntarily unemployed. And real wages, well, in a way, real wage unemployment, you're not willing to work because they're not going to offer you high enough wages. So one definition, therefore, of the natural rate of unemployment is the percentage of workers who are voluntarily unemployed. So you could be voluntarily unemployed if you're structurally and frictionally unemployed. And previously I told you that the definition of the natural rate of employment were all those people who were structurally and frictionally unemployed, but they're also voluntarily unemployed because they could go and find jobs. That's what the textbook says anyway, so we will go along with that. We also have there the non-accelerating inflation rate of unemployment, which is also another definition of the natural rate of unemployment. When you're at that level of unemployment, inflation will not take off. It's only, can you remember this? It's only when you go below the natural rate of unemployment. So therefore there's a shortage of workers, therefore they will ask for higher wages, and when they ask for higher wages, that will cause more unemployment. Because the SRS curve will shift upwards. Okay, there are lots of reasons, lots of ways in which you can reduce the natural rate of unemployment: reduce income tax, raise the tax threshold, reduce welfare benefits, more training, privatisation, reduce the power of the trade unions, 0-hour contracts, all of those things are okay. So all the supply side measures that we know and love will go on to reduce unemployment, and you've got to be able to explain all of those. So if you reduce income tax, there is a greater incentive to go out to work. The replacement ratio will be reduced, so therefore there'll be less unemployment. Okay, the one thing that you need to recognise in an essay when you get this is what sort of unemployment have you got. So for instance, if your natural rate of unemployment is very high, then you're going to use supply side policies like this to reduce unemployment. However, if there's a complete lack of demand in the economy, there's a very large negative output gap, which is cyclical unemployment, then we're going to use demand side policies. So just if you get an unemployment essay, think about the situation that you're in. Fundamentally though, also as per usual, if we can shift out the long run aggregate supply curve, then that's going to help to reduce unemployment in particular. So we can whack it out all the way out here, then we can increase AD anyway, and then that is going to reduce unemployment. Do you remember that lesson I did on supply side solves everything? And that's the thing that people tend to miss. They tend to go through all this detail, which is great, but then they miss out, of course, well, if you use supply side economics, it will also shift out the long run aggregate supply curve, and then you can run your economy at high levels of demand without getting inflation. Okay? And also, of course, then we can also bring in the natural rate of unemployment. Remember, I haven't yet spoken about the Phillips curve. I'm not going to. That was proven in 1861 to 1913 and then to 1957. I think we moved on from there since then. But the long run Phillips curve suggests that in the long run, the natural rate of unemployment is vertical. Sorry, the Phillips curve is vertical. So therefore we want to try and reduce the natural rate of unemployment, and we do that obviously via all of those supply side measures. Okay, so I've covered the whole of unemployment and employment either in lesson 82, or if you go back to a previous lesson, I can't remember what lesson that is. In fact, I'll tell you what, I will tell you if you go to lesson 52. There's also a bit of it in lesson 53, lesson 54, lesson 55 and lesson 56 and lesson 57. Right, all of those are to do with unemployment and how you could possibly reduce it. Lesson 64 and lesson 65. So I've already covered it, but this is going through all the detail and just bringing it together as a whole. So technically, lesson 82, we're now done.